In this chapter, we're going to talk about some of the details of customer service for planners. We're going to talk about the main kinds of customers you experience and help you understand what motivates them and how you can best help them in your job. There are many kinds of planning office customers, but generally, I like to think of it as 5 basic types that come into the office day after day and usually think about similar things. First off, there's the applicant. Second off, there's a neighbor. Third, there's the gadfly. Fourth, there's the reporter. And fifth, there's the politician. These are general terms for larger groups of people, but the terms help you think about the general categories. Let's talk a little bit about each one of them in succession and what makes them tick. First off, there's the applicant. This is what I think of as the purest customer. They're coming in because they have to do business with your organization. They don't always want to be there. Sometimes they've been told they need to get a permit from your office. Sometimes they're told they need your sign off on something. Most of the time, they're not there voluntarily. What they need are good explanations, helpfulness, and some understanding. They need to understand why they're there, what the process will be, what the result will be, and some honesty about their chances of getting success so they can make decisions on their own. If you have the resources, it's always helpful to assign a project manager to each applicant so they're not shuffled from person to person at City Hall. No one hates more than anyone else being told, I need to go downstairs to get one thing, then come back upstairs once you have it signed, then go to the 4th floor and get something else. If you have a project manager, that person can help make all of that go a little more quickly. Second off, there's a neighbor. Many times the neighbor's not happy about things either. You may be a proxy for why they're upset and for the problem they're concerned about. It's often a development next to their house or in their neighborhood or some other thing that they're concerned about. Remember, rightly or wrongly, they blame you for the development in their backyard. They're not happy about it, and you're the person that they can often talk to about it most directly. These neighbors also need a sympathetic ear. What they need, most importantly, is a clear explanation about the process and their chances to provide input and what may happen at the end. They don't need false hope that a project may not get approved if you think it almost certainly will. On the other hand, be careful not to predetermine what a board or commission might decide. Just be clear and let them know what the steps are and try to keep them in the loop as much as you can. As I said before, the most important thing with neighbors is not to overpromise. If they don't like a rule or an ordinance that causes a project to be allowed near their house, they do have a response, and that's to perhaps change the ordinance in the future. But it may be difficult for them to do so for this project. Be fair and make sure they understand that. Explain your role and explain their role clearly. Next, there's what I call the gadfly. These are the folks that I call professional planning interest people. They feel they know more than you. They feel, to some extent, they've been at the process longer than you have. Sometimes they have been if they've lived in the community their whole life and you're relatively new to it. They like to show their knowledge. Respect that like. Make sure you listen to them. Make sure they have a chance to explain what they know, even if you've heard it a million times before. They enjoy having you engage with them about the process, and it's important to take the time to do so. It's very important to have a sense of humor about this without laughing at the person. Sometimes it's actually fun to listen to hear some planning history about your community, or projects that happened before, or their take on something that you've also experienced from a different perspective. It's important not to worry about this being a mental battle or winning it. This is an engagement with a person who has very strong opinions about what you do, and that's okay. You don't have to agree, but you should treat them respectfully and listen. The next type of person you often run into is the reporter. They may not be officially a reporter for the media, but they often have several characteristics in common with them. To some extent, they view you as between them and the truth, and they want to get to that truth as best as possible to either get the scoop as part of their job or just to learn something that they may think you're trying to hide from them. They range from very cynical to people who simply really want to understand something. Generally, you treat them the same way, but it is important to understand how much credibility you have in their eyes. It's also very important to follow your organization's policies on dealing with the media. Some organizations don't care who speaks to the media, and you may decide that within your organization you want to follow that same policy. Other places are very centralized and require that any media inquiries go through a communications person. It's very important that you follow those policies, even if you think they're silly. If you don't follow your internal policies, your internal credibility will hurt, and at the end of the day, your message will get muddled. It's important not to hide things from these folks, but it's also not your job to write their story for them. You may know what they're trying to get at, but that's really their job to figure out. You should provide them with accurate information in a timely fashion and let them do their job, and you can get on with yours. It's important to be friendly, but it's also important to be on message. We're going to talk more about dealing with the media at a later chapter. Generally, you should write what you want to say or say what you want to say and try to stick to it. Try not to waffle on what you're saying. But again, it's critical to be accurate and fair. The final type of person you often deal with is generally called the politician. It really depends a lot on what their general attitude towards you and what you do is. And they may not be officially an elected politician, but there are many people that fit into these categories. Board and commission members, city managers, mayors, external forces. It's very important to treat all these people with the equal amount of respect. They have a certain amount of power, and you may not. Again, you should follow your policies. Some city managers or mayors don't want staff speaking to city council members. If that's true, it's not your fault, and you should be honest about what that statement is and reroute them back to the person they should be speaking to. Other places are very open-ended, and again, that gives you an opportunity, but it also presents a challenge. Remember that to them, you are planning. They may not know anything else about city planning. They may have never worked with anybody else or read anything about what the field is. You are it. So make sure that you think about opportunities to help them understand your field and why it's important. At the same time, remember, they may have their own agenda, and they may not necessarily be concerned with whether it follows good planning or not. Don't argue too much with them, but explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. Provide opportunities to explain why what you're doing may be a best practice, but remember, they may not care that much about that. That's okay. It's not their job. So to summarize, the 5 types of people you often deal with in the office: the applicant, the neighbor, the gadfly, the reporter, and the politician.